Well, welcome to One Life Explore Edition. This is Sarah.
And this is Matt.
And One Life Explore Edition is our opportunity to talk to you, someone who might be exploring the ideas of the Christian faith. Maybe you wouldn't be comfortable going to a normal church service, or maybe you just have never really explored some of these things. Maybe you have some great questions about Christian beliefs, and hopefully this is a place where you can feel comfortable asking those questions.
Yeah, we really do want this to be a dialogue, not a monologue. You probably had people talking at you, and we want to give you a space to ask questions. If you're watching live right now, that's awesome. We have a chat feature where you can go on, ask a question, and after this episode ends, we're going to do a live Q&A with our lead pastor, Brett Nicholson. And also, if you're watching later on YouTube, just go down in the comments and leave us a question there, and we will do our best to respond in that space as well. But today, we're going to talk about something that's one of my favorite things, people. I really like people. People can be really great. I also know people can be not great, but Matt, there are some really cool things that people do, okay? Like people can do like really cool tricks. Do you have any cool tricks you can do?
I mean, I don't know if it's cool. I can take a ping pong ball and kind of make it hover above my face for a couple seconds.
Okay, I don't believe you. I need to see it.
Well, lucky for you, I have an orange ping pong ball here on Planty.
We also name our plants here.
It's Planty. Let's see if I can do it. All right, here we go. Hey, not bad.
Wow, that's pretty good. I'm impressed.
Thank you. So, hey, maybe you have a ridiculous trick you can do. I'm sure it's better than mine. Please tell us what it is in the comments. Whether you're watching this live, you can say that now, or on YouTube if you watch it later. Even better, if you have video of you doing something cool like that, post that somewhere and tag us. We'd love to see it. So, other than One Life Explore Edition and our Sunday services, we also have a One Life podcast that we do every week. Sarah's actually the co-host. They do an awesome job. I would totally recommend you guys checking that out if you haven't. But the cool thing is we got into some content on the podcast that really relates to the topic we're getting into tonight. Tell them about it.
Yeah, actually we had a conversation with our friend Keith Patterson, and Keith really just came on and we had a great conversation where he shared with us his own personal experiences with racism. And you know, that's something that just has to end. We really want to continue being a part of having conversations of things that are just terrible, like racism. And so we know that Christians haven't always been the best at that. And so we want to continue talking about maybe some of the bad things that people do and talk about why, because that's a question you probably have always asked.
Yeah, definitely. And the reality is, if we say we are Christians, we take that as our identity, that means we have to go with what the Bible says about people. And the Bible says that people are made in the image of God, and every single person, no matter what they look like or where they're from, that they have this extremely beautiful value in creation that's above all other things because we're made in His image. And so we're going to start the conversation off tonight by watching a short film that kind of gets into that topic, and then we'll hear from our lead pastor, Brett.
Have you ever seen this? It puts life in perspective, doesn't it? Not only that, it slips in a philosophical point that goes something like this. You're not that big of a deal. Science popularizer Bill Nye the Science Guy, in an acceptance speech he delivered when he was named Humanist of the Year, captured the same idea. He said, "I'm just another speck of sand, and Earth, really, in the cosmic scheme of things, is another speck. And our sun, an unremarkable star, nothing special, another speck, and the galaxy is a speck. I'm a speck on a speck, orbiting a speck among other specks amongst still other specks in the middle of specklessness. I am insignificant, I suck." While we all may admire the humility, even the reality of seeing ourselves as specks of sand, it's not exactly a pep talk if you happen to be searching for the meaning of your life. And we all know when he says, "I suck," he's really saying, well, we suck. If you're a human being, you're not that big of a deal. More importantly, he's answering one of life's most meaningful and important questions, a worldview question. Who are we? Are human beings special, or are we just specks? We know Bill Nye's answer. Others have said similar things. Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes said, "I see no reason for attributing to man a significance different in kind from that which belongs to a baboon or a grain of sand." To be fair, Nye, Holmes, and others are, at best, simply trying to be consistent with their answer to the other, more foundational worldview question: where did everything come from? Depending on your answer to that question, what you think of the value of people, well, it'll follow. If everything came from nothing, no design, no purpose, no overarching reason, and we also happen to be infinitesimally small compared to the universe, it's easy and logical to conclude that people aren't any more significant than grains of sand. But the problem gets more complicated when we follow that idea onto its real-life implications. Think about an issue most of us care deeply about: human rights and equality. Thomas Jefferson's opening words to the U.S. Declaration of Independence establishes the case for freedom and self-rule on the idea that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. What if Jefferson built his argument on Bill Nye's or Oliver Wendell Holmes' ideas? Imagine the document might sound like this. Since all of the evidence points to the fact that human beings are specks in a sea of specklessness and have no more significance than a grain of sand, and so all most definitely suck, it makes perfect sense for us to risk our lives and our honor to form a country where those same specks can continue to suck and live insignificant and meaningless lives in freedom. That doesn't have quite the same soul-stirring quality. The great ancient Hebrew songwriter King David pondered the same things Bill Nye did, but he reached different conclusions. He sings these lyrics to God. When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is mankind that you are mindful of them? Even though he didn't know the full extent of the size of the universe, he could feel the same sentiment just looking up into the night sky and wonder why God would care about people. But he answers the question differently. First, he concludes that the heavens aren't there to communicate about us. He writes, "The heavens declare the glory of God." In other words, they aren't there to comment on the glory of man. But he turns around and affirms the importance of mankind by adding, "God, you have made people a little lower than the angels and crowned them with glory and honor." His answer to the question, who are we, is human beings are special because the Creator has declared them to be special. Or in Thomas Jefferson's words, we have been endowed by our Creator. Before that idea is dismissed as lightweight, simplistic religion, remember that Thomas Jefferson called it self-evident. Also consider the immense amount of outside evidence that we see every day that says human beings really are special. Albert Einstein said, "The most incomprehensible thing about the world is that it is at all comprehensible, and human beings have the gift of comprehending." We can work out vast formulas on chalkboards and comprehend everything from supernovas to subatomic particles, or we can take those mental abstractions, combine them with ingredients we've discovered in the dirt, and convert them into a near infinite number of things, from hairdryers to Ferraris. We can build flying machines that weigh tens of thousands of pounds. We can carry hundreds of passengers 40,000 feet in the air, moving 500 miles per hour while they can all relax and watch reruns of The Office. We can create entire worlds from our imaginations. We can dance. Well, some of us can dance. We are the only creature on Earth that can control fire. We craft instruments from trees and convert their sounds into classic vinyl. We store food in freezers and figured out how to make snow cones. We sit on furniture, ride on roller coasters, post pictures on Instagram. We've discovered the periodic table. We perform surgery. We love sports. We love each other. We build skyscrapers and art. We ski behind boats or down mountains, and we even invented the Pop-Tart. Yes, we're small, but maybe G.K. Chesterton had it right when he said, "It is quite futile to argue that man is small compared to the cosmos, for man was always small compared to the nearest tree." Maybe smallness has nothing to do with value. We don't look at the smallest among us and think, "You're just a speck, you suck." We actually feel the opposite. So, why should we say that about any of us?
You know, along our journey of exploring, I've made the claim that one of the fundamental reasons that I believe the Christ-centered worldview is the truth is that it corresponds to life as we experience it more than other worldviews do. And I think this whole question of who are we as human beings really shines a spotlight on that. Now, before I explain why, I want to do a little bit of review. We've encouraged everyone that's exploring to think of beliefs as worldviews. And your worldview is your answer to the most meaningful and important questions of life. And all worldviews answer these questions. They're questions like, where did everything come from? Who are we? Now, once you take that, we've given you kind of a fourfold grid, and I want to show you again. I may or may not have written these things down, but all worldviews give answers. First of all, Bill Nye's answer to who are we, he says we're insignificant. He says we're like grains of sand. That is his view and his answer to that. Secondly, reasons. Everybody has reasons for the things that they believe, and Bill Nye does. I mean, he would try to back it up with science. He would do things like that. All beliefs have implications, though. When you take those beliefs and really think them through, they add up to conclusions. And finally, all true beliefs, I mean the ones that are really deep down, that are convictions, add up to our actions in life. Well, I want to illustrate why I think that the Christ-centered worldview answers this question of who are we better than anybody, and it also corresponds to reality as we experience it by comparing two characters that we're all very well aware of. The first is Martin Luther King Jr. And Martin Luther King Jr. deserves our admiration. He has our admiration because of his deep convictions around racial equality and the things that he did for civil rights, where he not only gave stirring speeches, but he ended up giving his life for this cause. I mean, think about it. His speech, I Have a Dream, is considered by most to be one of the greatest speeches ever delivered. And it calls us to higher ideals that most of us want to match up to. Well, where did he get that? Well, there's a book out called Martin Luther King in the Image of God. And he answers the question, who are we? And listen how he answers it. This is a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. The whole concept of the Imago Dei, as it is expressed in Latin, the image of God, is the idea that all men have something within them that God injected. Not that they have substantial unity with God, but that every man has capacity to have fellowship with God. And this gives him a uniqueness. It gives him worth. It gives him dignity. If you wonder why Martin Luther King Jr. did the things that he did, believed the things that he believed, that was his answer to the question of who are we. So there's his answer. Now, what were his reasons? I would imagine his reasons, first of all, he grew up in a pastor's home. He was in a very Bible-saturated environment. His dad was a preacher and missionary, so he's surrounded by that. And he also reports about how he experienced racism growing up, and he could tell there was a disparity. Something's wrong here, and that was the reasons why he developed the conviction that he did about us being created in the image of God. But think about that. Once he adopted that, what were the implications? He thought to himself, now wait a minute. If all people are created in the image of God, and they all have dignity, and they all have worth, that means that the color of my skin, no matter what it is, if I'm a human being, I have dignity and I have worth, and it's not lessened by my skin color. So that became this deep, abiding conviction that he had. And then we all know it led up to his actions. And I'm talking the deep-rooted kind of beliefs that he had led to his actions, kind of actions that stir people through speeches like the I Have a Dream speech, or he was willing to go to jail, he was willing to lay down his life for what he believed. Now think about him. Now on the opposite side of things is Adolf Hitler. Now, as soon as I bring up Adolf Hitler, I know that he is the cliche evil one. I see people on Twitter and a lot in our culture. Anytime you don't like another group, you call them Nazis, you call them fascist. So they're kind of a cliche evil, but that's one of the reasons I picked it in a way. I've studied the Nazis and Adolf Hitler for a long time, and the reason is because they serve as a baseline evil. What I mean by that is the 99.9% of all people agree that Adolf Hitler and the Nazis were evil. And so I think, okay, if we all agree on that, to study them and look at them and what they really thought and why they thought what they thought would be a useful enterprise, because we already agree that they're evil. So think about Adolf Hitler. Why did he do what he did? Well, there's a book out about him that's interesting to read. It's called Hitler's Table Talks. Hitler's Table Talks. Apparently, Hitler liked to give dinner parties nearly every weekend, and he dominated the conversation. I mean, if you're a dictator, you kind of do that. He dominated the conversation, and apparently he would wax eloquent all the time for hours, and it was kind of boring, according to people who felt free later to say about that. But there was a secretary that wrote down the things that he said. And I want you to hear how he explains this question of who are we, and where did he get his ideas, and why. And the context is, he was talking about when he went off to World War I as a soldier, he was filled with idealism. But then he goes on to say this is the quote, "Then I saw men falling around me in the thousands. Thus I learned that life is a cruel struggle and has no other object but the preservation of the species. The individual can disappear, provided there are other men to replace him." Now, people ask, why would you destroy St. Petersburg? A little editorial note here, that St. Petersburg was laid siege upon by the Germans and millions of people starved to death. So why'd you do that? I would prefer not to see anyone suffer, not to do harm to anyone. But when I realize that the species is in danger, then in my case, sentiment gives way to the coldest reason. I am certainly not a brutal man by nature, and consequently, it is cold reason that guides my actions. So what's his answer to the question of who are we? He says it. His answer is, we're a species that's struggling for survival, and that's it. And what were his reasons? Well, he said his reasons were he went away to World War I and he saw soldiers dying around him everywhere and he saw human beings seem to be expendable. So life is a cruel struggle. He wrote an autobiography called Mein Kampf, means my struggle. That's how he viewed life. Well, it's not hard to see the implications of that. If you view life that way, that's all human beings are. We're all out for a struggle, then the strong survive and the weak do not. It is survival of the fittest. And if you fully embrace that idea, well, that's where he came up with this whole thing of the Germanic people are the master race, and they're going to prove that. You know, one of the reasons he invaded Russia, he also said during Table Talks, was that they have resources that the German people didn't have. So we went in there and we just wanted to take them away, pure and simple. But it's not hard to see why his actions, if he really had that deep conviction that life is a cruel struggle, and that's all we're trying to do is survive as a species, then the actions are, I can take out the weak and I can put myself at the top and be the strong. Now you put those two things together, here's what's interesting about them, is that, again, the Christ-centered worldview, in my view, corresponds to reality as we experience it, but not only that, how we want it to be. Martin Luther King Jr. gets up and gives this stirring speech, and he's inspiring us towards a dream of a day when young boys and young girls will be judged by the content of their character and not the color of their skin, right? We aspire to that. We want that. There was something in there that's soul stirring and feels right about the universe. And you can see, and it was all tied to his answer to the question that he believed that all people were created in the image of God. On the flip side, it's not hard to see the thing that we have named evil, the thing that we've all agreed is evil, was rooted in the answer to that question that was, everybody's just struggling for survival. That's all human beings are. So, one points to the Christ-centered worldview. The other doesn't. Something to think about.
Well, thanks so much for joining us for this episode. Thank you for your comments and your questions, and we continue to talk about these things in the Q&A following this. It's on Facebook, and there should be a link in the chat right now.
Now there's also a link for more resources. We know that this is something that you can't just take a couple 20 minutes here and just have all the answers. Take some more time and explore for yourself. Use some of the resources that we're providing. Also, if you want to watch any of the previous episodes, you can do that on YouTube. You can also share those out. Thank you guys for that, and we'll see you next week for episode 5.